Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military of Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And of course the most important updates are coming from the United States of America, because the most expected statements were made by the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, and he was talking about the Russian Federation. Trump makes statements threatening Russia over war in Ukraine. Trump said he's unhappy with Russia's position on Ukraine. The US and NATO have reached an agreement on supplying weapons to Ukraine at the expense of the Europeans. The US will impose import duties of 100% on Russia and its trading partners if Moscow and Washington do not reach an agreement on Ukraine. The US will impose secondary sanctions on Russia and its trading partners if there is no deal on Ukraine within about 50 days. So these are the statements of the President of the United States of America, and telling the truth, I believe that everybody in the world was waiting for something more crushing than these statements. Let's talk about the reaction that we got from Kiev, because lots of people made their own comments. We're talking about politicians. Trump gave Putin another 50 days to seize Ukraine. Ukraine parliament member slammed US president. In particular, Ukraine parliament Marina Bezugla criticized Trump's statement. Earlier, the US president threatened secondary sanctions against Russia and its partners, but only after 50 days and with the condition unless a deal on Ukraine is reached. So Ukrainians are very unhappy with this situation. They expected that the United States of America will destroy Russia with sanctions, but nothing like this happened. Another important thing is that, according to information we have, Keith Kellogg arrived in Kiev, where he had a meeting with Zelensky, and he's going to stay in Kiev for another week, for this week, and he will most likely is going to talk with Zelensky about weapon supply. Today in Kiev with Zelensky, we will discuss Trump's historic agreement with NATO that will speed up deliveries of America's best weapons to Ukraine, funded entirely by allies. It speeds deliveries, supports Ukraine's defense, strengthens NATO unity, and underscores its commitment to peace through strength. So this is the situation. Zelensky, when talking about this statement, is very happy. Furthermore, Zelensky had a call with President Trump. He had a conversation with US President Donald Trump, a very good discussion. Thank you for your willingness to support Ukraine and continue joining the force to stop the killings and establish a lasting and just peace. We agreed to communicate more frequently and coordinate our next steps. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, America. That was stated by Zelensky. According to information we have, Zelensky is going to receive several Patriot systems, and he stated that Germany and Norway will buy Patriots for him. I am grateful to our team, grateful to the United States, Germany, and Norway for preparing a new decision on Patriots for Ukraine. So Ukraine will have a lot of weapons in coming days. Furthermore, according to information we have, most likely Trump may transfer long-range Javelin missiles of 4 F-16s to Ukraine. Zelensky wishes to attack not just deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation. He talked with Trump, and Zelensky wishes to attack the city of Moscow and the city of St. Petersburg. This is new doctrine of Ukraine to move the war from the territory of Ukraine to the territory of the Russian Federation. Of course, once again, as I told you a minute ago, everybody expected something more crushing that we can see right now, and we have the reaction, of course, from the Russian side. Probably everybody expected that there's going to be a panic or something like this, but we have completely opposite picture. Right now in front of your screens, we can see a Russian market. So this is how Russian market reacted on the Trump statements. Meanwhile, due to the absence of sanctions from Trump expected by many today, as many expected, we will still have 50 days to trade. The market went up, so the Russians are getting money on the statement of the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump. So as you can see, everything is okay with the Russian Federation. Nothing collapsed. The Russians continue their special military operation, and they will continue this at least for another 50 days. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, because we have lots of very interesting updates during the previous 24 hours. And after a very short operational pause, we received another update from the South Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk directions. The Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Voskresenka. This village was secured by the Russians today, and the Russian sources published this video. And in this video we can see, as usually in every single video published by the Group of Forces East, how exactly the battle for the settlement of Voskresenka have been taking place. We can see lots of explosions, lots of attacks, then the Russians start using drones to clear the territory of Ukrainian vehicles, infantry, tanks, and probably FPV drone positions, and then Russian infantry answered the game. And in the final part of this video, as usually, we can see lots of episodes how Russians were raising their flags in different parts of the settlement. As for the beginning of the 15th of July, we managed to gelocate one of the flag in the central part, another flag on the territory of these farms. But there were more episodes, most likely during the day. We're going to receive additional geolocations. Anyway, based on this video, and most likely today, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will also confirm Russian control over the settlement of Voskresenka. We will add additional geolocations, and the village is now under complete Russian control. So this is the situation. The Russians continue their offensive. The Russians are going to move further, but obviously the Russians will slow down a bit. Now let's compare the situation between the days. Once again, for example, this is the situation by the end of the 14th of July of 2025. We got reports that the Russians managed to get as close as possible to the settlement. We have a lot of geolocations how Russians were attacking Ukrainian positions. And this morning we got a final proof that the village of Voskresenka was secured by the Russians completely. Now we believe that the Russians will try to finish the battles for the settlements of Zelený Gai and Novokhatskaya and the settlement of Grushevskaya, and then there's going to be another long pause until the Russian forces will be able to get the villages of Alexandrograd and the settlement of Andreevka-Klivtsova, which are located along the border between Dnipro region and the Donetsk region. So it will take several weeks, obviously, and during this slow offensive operation, the Russians will continue their regrouping, and after they finish their regrouping, most likely the Russians may try to attack deep inside of the territory of the Dnipro region with the purpose to get as close as possible to the river of Dnipro itself. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pakovsk direction. I would like to remind you that the Russians launched their major offensive operation in this area several days ago, and as a result of clashes during the previous days, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly, and the thing is that the Russians continue their offensive. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 11th of July of 2025, and this is the situation on the moment before the beginning of complete collapse of Ukrainian defense and Ukrainian probably lines in this area. So this is the situation by the end of the 12th of July of 2025. The Russians managed to enter the settlement of Novotoretska and to get as close as possible to the settlement of Mayak, and this was exactly the moment when the front line collapsed. Starting from the 12th of July, the Russians were advancing every single day further and further in the west and the northwestern directions and taking more and more territories under their complete control. It seems that Ukrainians can't do anything with this Russian offensive operation. The Ukrainians are trying to stabilize the situation, but the problem is that Ukrainians are no longer talking about the settlements of Novoekonomichne, the settlements of Boykovka and Novotoretska as a base of the stabilization. The Ukrainians are talking more and more about the villages and cities of Rodinska and Belitska. So they're planning to stabilize the situation much deeper to the west from the current positions, which is very, very critical and bad situation for the Ukrainians. Furthermore, today the Russians and pro-Ukrainian mappers, so a lot of mappers made additional changes by the morning of the 15th of July. Pro-Ukrainian resources reported that the Russians continue their offensive operation from the settlement of Razin in the western direction, and it seems that the Russians are trying to attack this mine and these facilities. Furthermore, according to pro-Ukrainian update, the sabotage and reconnaissance group of the armed force of the Russian Federation were able to get these three lines, so the edge position where the Russian soldiers were discovered and spotted is this tree line right to the east of the settlement of Rodinska. So basically, we believe that the first sabotage and reconnaissance group of the armed forces of the Russian Federation already have entered the settlement of Rodinska. So we expect very heavy clashes in this area because the Russians understand if they take this settlement under complete control, this is going to be a complete collapse of Ukraine defense, and we are not kidding with this. Further on, the Russians are about to secure the village of Fedorovka and Boykovka. This information was confirmed by several pro-Russian resources. Today we are waiting for additional updates. These two villages most likely would be taken by the Russians, and not just villages, but also dense network of the fortifications between Mayak, the settlement, to the north of this area, and the settlement of Razin. So all these trenches would be taken by the Russians, and this is going to be the biggest disaster ever for Ukraine, because as you can see, the further the Russians are moving in the northwestern direction, the less strongholds we can see in front of the Russian forces, which means that Ukrainians will have less and less possibilities to control the situation outside the cities and villages. But obviously it's impossible to control the situation just from inside of the cities, because every single city can be encircled by the Russians, and we can see this on the example with the situation in the Pakovsk agglomeration. Now let's talk about the Konstantinovka direction, and here we can see the same story. The front line collapsed completely. Today we got a lots of changes on the ground. We have changes in the area of the settlement of Yablunovka, we have changes in the southern part of Alexandra Kalinova, and the most important, we have changes in the area of Novospaskaya. The Russians began their major offensive operation in this area as well, with the purpose to get as close as possible to the city of Konstantinovka and to finally finish the battle for this defense layer. For example, in the west central, this is already a central part of Yablunovka, we can see how Russian soldiers were attacking this territory, how the Russians landed infantry and secured this part of the settlement. Based on this video, as you can see, we have colored almost the entire central part of Yablunovka. Furthermore, the Russians attacked the city of Alexandra Kalinova from the south, and this is already the video that we discussed yesterday. Here we can see super purple armored turtle tank of the armored forces of the Russian Federation that Ukrainians tried to destroy within using 60 drones, but the tank was damaged just when tank entered a minefield. So this video shows how the Russians were attacking, and the Russians managed to get this line. So based on this video, we have adjusted also significant territories along N20 road and 0524 road. So obviously the northwestern, let's say, northwestern flank of the entire southeastern Kliban-Byrsky pocket collapsed completely, and the Russians managed to cut these lines for Ukrainians. And the most important video is coming from the settlement of Novospaskaya. In this video we can see how Russian FPV drone operator was filming the central part of the settlement of Novospaskaya, where we can see at least 2 Russian soldiers that raised a flag or sign of a unit who is responsible for clearing of this settlement. Based on this video, this morning of the 15th of July of 2025, most of the mappers adjusted their maps in the Russian favor. So as you can see, the situation for Ukrainians is very difficult, but when talking about different pro-Russian resources, they colored even more. And according to several reliable resources, by the morning of the 15th of July, the Russians already secured 66% of the settlement of Novospaskaya. So which means that Ukrainians who are currently located in the area of Sherbinovka, more precisely in the central and the southern and the eastern part of Sherbinovka, we are talking about this cauldron, this pocket were caught in cauldron by the Russians without any chances for evacuation. Obviously it will take time, the Russians, until before they are able to secure this area, but we are talking obviously about several hundreds of Ukrainians, about several battalions that lost any possibilities for evacuation, because we believe Ukrainians are no longer able to use this road for evacuation because they would be destroyed by the Russian fire and artillery drone attacks. Maybe they had this possibility the previous night, and maybe today some mappers or different mappers will adjust this territory in Russian favor, which will signal us that the pocket was abandoned by the Ukrainians Ukrainians and that the Russians managed to maintain the line. So the southern Konstantinovka direction collapsed, as we can see, and the Russians most likely will finish the battle for this area in coming days, probably weeks, but not obviously months. We're talking about 2, maybe or 3 weeks, and everything to the south of Kliban Bek, a water reservoir, would be taken by the Russians completely. So the front line continues collapsing without any chances for stabilization. Zelensky and the Western countries believe that the Ukrainians will be able to stabilize the situation with very modern weapon of the United States of America. One thing I can tell you for sure, that time will tell. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.